Hello, my name is Zarif Kazi, and this is my presentation on the rise of nicotine use in young people. So, just to begin with, we're going to start with a bit of background information. And so, nicotine use has been on the rise amongst the younger population over the past few years. And this has been of growing concern because of all the serious health effects that nicotine can have, including addiction, negative effects on brain development, and respiratory problems. These are specifically ones that can happen if people start using nicotine younger in life. They tend more likely to develop addiction and again, like stunting brain development. So youths that use nicotine are also more likely to use other substances like marijuana or alcohol. And again, if they have an addiction to nicotine, they're more likely to have an addiction to another substance as well. Currently, if the nicotine use continues at the current rate amongst the youth, it's going to result in 4.6 million youths that are alive today projected to die due to tobacco-related illnesses. So this is a very serious concern for the communities. Next, we're going to talk about how do young people start using nicotine. So factors that might influence them starting to use it. So in terms of how young people start using nicotine, there are several factors, and I have 5 included here that I find to be of pertinence. So number 1 is peer influence. That is the way I feel most, and according to studies, is the way that most youth start using nicotine. So this can be adolescents who have friends or family members who use nicotine products. They're more likely to start using the products themselves. And as we all know, growing up, what our friends do around us influences our actions quite a lot as well. So peer influence is one of the big things that cause young adults and youths to start using nicotine. And it also becomes a sort of social thing where when they're hanging out with their friends, they tend to use nicotine together, especially with the rise of e-cigarettes and vapes. Like if one person in the friend group has it, they tend to like all do it together. So, that peer influence plays a big factor. Second thing is curiosity. Well, we have all been young, and we know that when we're young, we're curious about a lot of things. So when they see advertisements and the novelty of vaping and smoking, they might just want to try it out of curiosity. And then if they sort of like the flavor, they might stick with it. And especially now with a lot of flavored e-cigarettes and vapes around, once the curiosity kicks in and they try it, they tend to want to do it a lot more. Second thing kind of feeds into the curiosity is marketing and advertising. So studies have shown that youths who have been exposed to tobacco marketing are more likely to use tobacco products. This was especially true with a company recently, I'm sure we all know, called Juul. They used to market heavily to the younger population, with colorful ad campaigns on Instagram and, with young people in their ad campaigns. So this targeted the young population quite a lot, and then it piqued their curiosity, with all these new flavors like mango, watermelon, strawberry, kind of piqued their curiosity as well. And that's how they started using nicotine. Another reason that a lot of youths can start using nicotine is because of stress and anxiety. So nicotine is known to have mood altering effects and can create feelings of relaxation and alertness. And this can be appealing to young people who are struggling with stress. And so in the adolescent range, when they're in high school, it can be a very, very stressful time. A lot of development is happening socially and physically. So during these stressful times, if you can just quickly take a few puffs and de-stress a little bit, that can be very appealing to young adults. And the last thing that I'm going to mention is accessibility. So youths who have easy access to tobacco products, such as through friends or family members, are more likely to start using these products themselves. And so when we talked about the marketing curiosity, these all they're marketed to, and then that piques their curiosity. And now on top of that, if they have access to it in the house, for example, let's say an older brother has a vape or a cigarette, and they try it out, and that can get them hooked on the nicotine. So the next thing we're going to talk about are individual and population-based characteristics of nicotine use in youths. So firstly, for individual characteristics, males, we're going to first talk about gender, and males are more likely to use nicotine than females, although over the recent years, this has kind of narrowed. And again, this is due to the new e-cigarettes and vapes, and them having flavors. They tend to appeal to females a lot more now as well. In terms of age, nicotine use tends to increase with age, so there are higher rates amongst adolescents and young adults. The third thing is mental health. Like we mentioned in the previous one, helps a lot with stress and anxiety oftentimes. So young adults with mental health disorders such as depression or anxiety are more likely to use nicotine products than those without these disorders. And again, that's because of the calming effects that we mentioned in the earlier side of nicotine. So, and the fourth thing is substance use. So young adults who use other substances like alcohol or marijuana are more likely to use it as well. This we briefly touched on in the first slide when we said that once kids start using nicotine, they might use other drugs as well. So it kind of works the reverse as well. If they're using other drugs, they're more likely to use nicotine as well. Next, we're going to talk about the population characteristics. So the first thing we're going to mention is socioeconomic status. So nicotine use tends to be higher amongst young adults from lower socioeconomic status. And the first point that I made kind of ties into the last point of education. And it also ties into the stress and anxiety part that we mentioned earlier and the peer influence part we mentioned earlier. So in terms of how it all ties together, when they're in a low socioeconomic background, they might not be properly well educated on the effects of nicotine, the long-term harm that it can cause. And because of this lack of education, they might be less hesitant to try it. In terms of the stress and anxiety, being in a lower socioeconomic status obviously comes with stress and anxieties, and so that can play an influence as well. And in terms of peer influence, when you're in a low socioeconomic neighborhood or background, the people that you're around sometimes they might also, in terms of, they might share the same level of education, and so that kind of peer influence being in those circles can sometimes often influence them to start using nicotine. The second thing is race and ethnicity. So according to the National Institute of Drug Abuse, there are higher rates among white and Hispanic young adults compared to African American young adults. So they're also more likely to start using nicotine at a younger age. And the third thing is the geographical location. So nicotine use varies by geographical location, with higher rates in certain regions of the country, such as in the United States. It can be seen more in the South. Number 4, again, we mentioned this education, but I'm going to reiterate this again because I feel like it is a very important point. Young adults with lower levels of education are more likely to start using nicotine products than those with higher levels of education. And again, this is because of the lack of knowledge of what can be the long-term health consequences of using these products. So now I'm going to briefly talk about the high-risk groups of interest. So not everyone is equally at risk. There are obviously people who are more likely to use it than others. And I have about 4 listed that I'm going to talk about right now. So to begin with, is going to be the LGBTQ plus community. So they're more likely to start using it than their non-LGBTQ plus peers. And factors that contribute to this are higher levels of stress, social stigma, as well as targeted marketing by the tobacco companies. So as I mentioned earlier, and we've mentioned a few times, stress and anxiety is a big reason that young people start using nicotine, and members of the LGBTQ plus community tend to be very much affected by stress and anxiety because it is a very stressful and anxious thing for them to go through in their life. And they might start using it during this period. And we mentioned marketing as well. So a lot of times in these ad campaigns, they'll specifically try to target this community because they know that this community is a bit more vulnerable and it is a bit predatory. And we're going to talk about measures that should be taken to stop this from happening. The next thing is youth with mental disorders. We mentioned this as well, how people with anxiety and depression are more likely to start using nicotine products, but it can also be seen in people who have bipolar disorder or ADHD. The third group that is, again, more of high risk is youth from low socioeconomic backgrounds. Like we mentioned in one of the slides where we said the population characteristics, people with low socioeconomic backgrounds have low levels of parental education and employment. That was reported by the American Lung Association, so that can influence them to start using nicotine. Use with the peer or family members who use nicotine products. Again, this is something we mentioned previously in terms of the accessibility. When they have easy access to these products, then it's more likely for them to start using it. And also it influences them to start using it. People who often look up to their, for example, older brothers or their father, if they see a member of the family that they look up to using it, they're more likely to start using it themselves. Next, we're going to talk about prevention and control strategies. So how do we prevent young people from using this as often? And the first thing that I want to mention is education and awareness. I think this is the most important part because it can affect the individuals. And then as a result of that, it can affect the whole community. So education and awareness campaigns can be used to inform young people about the risks and harms associated with nicotine use, as well as the negative health effects of smoking and vaping. These campaigns can be delivered through school-based programs or social media or other channels. As we mentioned before, social media has often been used to market nicotine products like Juul and e-cigarettes to these youths. And so we can use the same platform, such as Instagram, to kind of target our education and awareness campaigns to spread awareness in the same platform where they get these harmful advertising campaigns from. Second thing is tobacco control policies. So governments should implement tobacco control policies such as increasing taxes on tobacco products, implementing smoke-free laws, banning the sale of tobacco products to minors, which is the case in a lot of countries, but some countries it is not, and banning the use of minors in advertising. So for example, when we talked about the company Juul, a lot of times it had teenagers in their advertising campaigns and it was targeted towards young people. So that should be banned. There should not be any form of advertising to young people to start using nicotine because again, that can pique their curiosity and influence them to start using it. In fact, I think in the US, the company Juul were mandated to stop their advertising campaigns targeted to young people, and now they focus their advertising campaign into more towards helping people who have a nicotine addiction or cigarette addiction to kind of help them through recovery. So it has been shown that if the government cracks down on these sort of advertising campaigns, it is shown to work. Number three is access restrictions. So restriction on access to tobacco products can be effective in reducing amongst young people. This includes raising the minimum legal age for purchasing tobacco products, limiting the availability of flavored tobacco products, and enforcing stricter ID checks. Like we said, the flavored tobacco products tends to be one of the reasons why a lot of young people start using nicotine. And so if we restrict access to flavored products or sort of ban flavored products even, then we can definitely help reduce the rise in young people. Number four is support and intervention programs that provide support and intervention to young people who are using nicotine products can also be effective in using it. These programs can include counseling, nicotine replacement therapy, and other forms of support. So counseling is very important because we mentioned that it's very common in people with mental health disorders, people with stress and anxiety. So counseling and support would definitely be helpful to reduce people from transitioning from stress and anxiety to using nicotine. And young adults and youth who already use nicotine and have an addiction should have public health services where they're able to access nicotine replacement therapy and be able to kind of recover from that. And the last thing that I'm going to mention is social norms. So changing social norms is very important. So if you change the norms around smoking and vaping, it can help reduce the risk amongst young people. And so social norms would kind of go into that peer influence bubble where if the social norm is to not use it, then one person is less likely to use it. Again, we oftentimes see friend groups using it, and then so socially they start using it. If that social norm of using it amongst friends changes, then we can see a change definitely coming up. And this can be done through social marketing campaigns or other forms of public education. And lastly, I'm going to mention my concept map. Over here, what I've tried to do is integrate everything that we've talked about into one map to kind of see how they play with each other. So the main thing that happens is the teens to start using nicotine. And so it kind of starts from either coping with stress and anxiety, the marketing or advertising, curiosity, peer influence, accessibility. Those are the reasons to start, but they're obviously influenced by other factors. So we can see here for the coping with stress and anxiety, mental health issues, socioeconomic status, LGBTQ youths, all of them affect the coping with stress and anxiety. That entire thing kind of flows into stress and anxiety. And so the support and intervention is how we would stop that from happening. And then over here, we can see that lack of education, it can be a reason they start using it. And so education campaigns and education and awareness campaigns to reduce this and help mitigate people to start using from that route. And again, like tobacco control policies to control the marketing and advertising. Over here, we can see that marketing and advertising also affects the curiosity. Peer influence also affects curiosity, and then they can start using it. So once that social norms change, that peer influence would kind of reduce. We can also see that peer influence comes from family members that use nicotine. And that also helps family members that use nicotine, also increases accessibility. So that access restriction would help reduce access restriction would reduce the accessibility from the family members. And these are the references for my slides. I hope this was beneficial. I hope that we learned a little more about something that is very common in our community and we need to address soon. Otherwise, it can get out of control and have serious health effects for the young population in our community. Thank you.